Hello, I'm Robin Midgley, specialist hand and upper limb therapist, and I welcome you to my interview with Kimberly Schipke, a biomedical engineer with over 6 years of research experience in tissue engineering, cellular or tissue mechanobiology, and medical device design. She has presented her work at the Biomedical Engineering Society, the Institute of Biological Engineers, and an elite school of biotechnology in Baramati, India. She is one of the greatest minds in science today. Due to her inquiring mind, destined to explore new frontiers in search of the truth, leading her into the realm of author, inventor, educator, scientist, and healer. A health crisis inspired Kimberly to study groundbreaking new treatments as well as integrative and ancient therapies. She studied under nuclear and astrophysicist Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher and Dr. Valerie Hunt, author of Infinite Mind. Kimberly became a certified clinical thermographer and used infrared cameras to study temperature changes on and around the body during energy-based treatment modalities like Qigong. In 2012, she began studying Biofield tuning, which uses audible sound like sonar around the body and tunes the body like an instrument. She is now the international class coordinator and former research director for the Biofield Tuning Institute and the international resource coordinator for the Foundation for Alternative and Integrative Medicine. So welcome, Kimberly. Thank you so much for being with us today and opening our minds to your world, because I've been reading so much about you and your world is very, very fascinating to us all.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to share and contribute in whatever way I can.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about your journey, because you've certainly gone down a few paths, starting in engineering and ending up with healing. So let us know about that journey.
Well, I earned my bachelor's and master's in biomedical engineering. I was, working in labs with cells and tissues, and I designed a cyclic pressure bioreactor to test heart valves at different pressure levels and at different heart rates. And so I went from working in a lab to, once I graduated, I started overseeing clinical trials for big pharmaceutical companies. And that was definitely an eye opener. I was sitting in a cubicle and I was just, like, is this really what I'm doing with my life? But also listening to the study drug versus the placebo and how many people died in the studies, faces twitching, tongue swollen, hospitalized, and seeing the numbers of those things. And 6 hours every Tuesday and Thursday. It was quite a bit to process. And eventually the company was shut down by the government agency for oversight because they passed a fraudulent study through our ethics committee and we approved it. So we were not overseeing trials properly. So the company got shut down. I'm really grateful for that. But shortly before the company shut down, I had had a seizure when I was in California. So they ran $10,000 worth of tests. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. They were like, you're low in potassium, but we can't think of, they said it could be a brain tumor, but we know you don't have insurance. Do you want to pay for a CAT scan? And I was like, nope. And I signed myself out. So when I went back to Colorado, I was in California at the time. When I went to Colorado, I went up to Boulder, which is a very alternative place. I'd always wanted to try acupuncture, excuse me. And so I tried acupuncture, and that night I was able to lay down without the room spinning, but it came back the next day. So I eventually, my friend introduced me to a chiropractor who, once he heard what was going on, I told him that I was on birth control pills. That's the only pill that I ever took, was the pill of all pills. And so he said, do you have this, and this? And I was like, yeah, how do you know my life? It blew my mind. And he said, well, that's all because of the birth control pills. And so I stopped taking those. He did some acupuncture. He gave me some homeopathic drops to clean out the residue that was depositing in my pineal gland. And so we cleared that out. And within pretty much the length of a cycle, 28 days, I felt like a brand new person. And these homeopathic drops, this whole session costs less than $30. And I was like, how did this work? Like the biomedical engineer in me is like, how and why does this work? I had no idea what homeopathy was. I just, it gives me a bottle, I'll take it, and it worked. So I ended up connecting with some other energy medicine scientists at a conference called ICEAM, which is held there in Boulder, Colorado, or Broomfield, Colorado. And it's where there's a group of scientists from all over the world. There was Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, who's a nuclear and astrophysicist who ended up being my mentor. I met her there. I met Claude Swanson, Carl Merritt, Beverly Rubik, who coined the term biofield, was there. There was an incredible group of scientists who were, speaking my language, but on the energy and biofield kind of terms. And so I was like, wow, there's a whole form of science that I didn't even know that existed, using frequency and physics rather than chemistry to be able to work with the body. So working with wave medicine instead of particle medicine. And my brain was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this even existed. So I had spent some time with Elizabeth Rauscher. She had developed an external pacemaker. So she used electromagnetic fields and a pendant to pace the heart. Like if you had a magnet on one side of a piece of glass and a magnet on the other, you move one magnet, the other magnet will follow. That's how she was pacing the heart using external electromagnetic. And coming from Mississippi, we're number one in cardiovascular disease and heart disease. And so I was like, I really want to learn more about this so we can help bring it back to my state and the rest of the world. So I asked her if I could spend a month with her in Apache Junction, Arizona, and just help her out. She was in a wheelchair, and I was like, I can help cook, clean, whatever you want. And so she gave me so much information about pulsed electromagnetic fields and the biofield in general. She took me up to the World Research Foundation Library with Steve Ross, and he's got books and ancient scrolls from all over the world that relate to energy medicine. And he gave me some books called Spectrochrometry Encyclopedia, written by Dinshaw Gadiali, and Let There Be Light by his son, Darius Dinshaw. And he said, your angels told my angels to give you these books.
Love it.
So, and he also gave me a book, a dissertation from Meher Master Moose called Rainbow Colors of Light. And she's the head of the Zoroastrian community in India, in Mumbai. And within a year, I was in Mumbai meeting Meher Master Moose and working to study more of the biofield at the Maharashtra Institute of Technology, MIT, in Pune at the World Peace Center. So I spent 8.5 years doing research into the biofield using various different technologies. And yeah.
Incredible. So I've heard a lot of people ask you, how can you be so young and be so experienced? And I think you've just been so fortunate to have had this shortcut to the experts where you've got, you had that intense time, you were given the right material, you met the right people at the right time, and it's just enabled you to do so much more with your time and in your career.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been working hard as soon as I was born. I feel like I've just been hitting the ground running. I mean, after graduating and starting to travel all over the world. I mean, after I started to study the biofield, I was going to clinics and conferences and writing up what I was seeing at these conferences. I was trying all of the different technologies and seeing what was out there. And when I was presenting at one conference, I started working with medical thermal imaging, where you can see the thermosphere of the human body, and you can see these changes live when people are doing energy-based work. So I was able to see the palms of a Qigong master and that heat and intensity just with her thought and intention with that fire. Or acupuncture treatments, you can see the heat in the knee. So I was giving lots of presentations, trying to get thermal imaging more out there into the world, because it is such a non-invasive screening tool that doesn't put any radiation into you. It's only detecting the radiation from your body to the camera. So I love that. It's been quite interesting doing, especially distance studies with a thermal camera where I can have the camera on someone and somebody else, thousands of miles away can start working on them, and you can see real time, the person's energy field shifting. It's pretty mind blowing.
Going back to your, when you had your episode in your health, what do you think had the most impact on you? Do you think it was a combination of modalities, or was there one specific modality that really helped you?
I think those homeopathic, I think, well, two things: the not taking birth control anymore. So that's not necessarily modality. It's just like, don't keep doing
This pharmaceutical.
Stop that.
Yeah.
So I stopped that. And then the homeopathic drops, I think, in clearing out my brain, I think that was probably the most powerful thing. The other thing he had done was it was acupuncture. I'm not sure what exactly it's called, but they look kind of like apple seeds on the size of them, and they puncture into your ear in certain places, and they'll kind of stay there for like 2 days, 3 days, however long, and your body will push it out when it's done. So he did do that, which was pretty. I'd never had anything like that before, but I definitely felt when he put metal into that point, it was like electricity. There's completing a circuit, and you could feel electricity moving through. So my bioengineer is like, what's happening? What's happening here? But so I definitely felt that, but I think honestly, the drops in my brain and clearing that out made me feel a lot clearer. And, what I didn't understand fully when I started taking the birth control pills is that what it does is it tricks your body into thinking that you're already pregnant. And so that you can't get pregnant again. So I had the hormones and the emotional roller coaster of a pregnant woman for 8 years. That's a long time for my own emotions to be taken on a ride, and to where I finally felt my own feelings at that point. And then also I had this kind of like tire of fat that I couldn't get rid of on my hips. I was doing kickboxing and I was doing strength and endurance training, but I couldn't get this little fat off of my hips. And I didn't realize that it was because of the hormones were like, oh, you're pregnant, so let's cushion these hips. And I couldn't get rid of that tire. So then when I stopped doing that, then I lost that, kind of tire of fat that was caused from the hormones that I was taking. And my boobs shrunk a little bit, but I'm okay with that.
So, and the next phase of a woman's life, perimenopause and menopause, I mean, that's also another time where, do you think that biofield tuning can influence one's hormones to help us through that chapter in our lives?
I've definitely seen a lot of pretty wild things happen with biofield tuning. Yes, I think that it can help with hormones. I have been teaching a class. I was teaching a biofield tuning class, and there was one of the students, she had started her moon cycle, and by the next day I had started. So that whole resonance effect. But when I was teaching her, I was standing with her using the tuning forks, and she was working on a woman who hadn't had her period in 10 years, a decade without a period. But yet the woman who's holding the tuning fork, and then I'm also guiding her, she and I are both like early on our moon.
Yes.
So as we're broadcasting that sound and start working, and we finish the session, when the lady gets up off of the table, she goes in the bathroom and she'd started her period.
Wow. That's incredible.
So sound and resonance, and especially with these areas, there's a lot that can shift. I was working on a woman, and she's a twin, and she lives with her twin. So they were both on their period at the same time, but they live with their mom, and their mom, all three of them were all on their period at the same time. Okay. So I end up, pendulum works for me to, shows for me to work in the sacral. So I work there. I didn't even know that this trifecta was going on. And I start right after I finish, like we finish the session, I go in the bathroom and I've started. And so it wasn't just, she's resonating with, her twin, which is like a double, frequency, same frequency, and her mother. So I definitely that area definitely shifts a lot. And I'm sure as many women know that, we sync up with people, and
Yeah.
resonance and sound, and that can definitely create a lot of shifts there, and the hormones and how things move.
That's it.
After that one where the lady hadn't had a period in 10 years, and then she started having one, all of the other older ladies were like, stay away from me.
I don't want to go there again. So. But exciting for somebody who's still so young and wants to kind of maintain that youth. That's incredible. So in our field, we work with hand injured patients, and the shift for me has been recently with an introduction to the LifeWave patches, and that was my first introduction to energy, because up until that point I was a very centralized therapist, very much focused on the primary condition and protocols and guidelines and just healing patients that way, until a patient came to me wearing these patches with a wrist injury. And I was like, what are these? And so it opened up a whole new world to me. But leading on from that, I've also started to appreciate using tuning forks to clear the energy in the room. You will go onto your spectrochrome laser, but working with patients, they have a lot of trauma. They come with a lot of emotional trauma. But it's also led me down the path of understanding the magnetic field of the body and resonance, and also, kind of order and chaos, and how when somebody's injured, either emotionally or physically, they're in a state of chaos, yet we can induce order through sound frequency or vibrational frequency or through light therapy. It's been quite a journey for me to understand the science of this. It's an easy application, simple application, but it's a very complicated science. And I feel that the medical profession isn't going to adopt the easy application because they don't understand the science. How much light excuse the pun, can you shed on this for us in terms of why does it work?
Well, I think the best way to describe it, especially with the tuning fork, is if you've ever watched two people, tune a guitar. So somebody's got the guitar that's out of tune and somebody has a guitar that's in tune, and the person just keeps giving them that in tune note, and then the person will make whatever adjustments that they need to make their guitar also in tune. So it takes two when you're doing it that way. So the tuning fork, what it does is it produces a coherent sound. And so that's that in tune note. And so it doesn't matter when it starts to interact with a chaotic energy, you just keep giving it that coherence, and that chaotic waveform will continue to shift to also become more coherent. It's the physics of adding two waveforms, a coherent and an incoherent waveform. And you just keep adding that coherence, and that incoherence and chaos will start to become more centralized. And same thing with the green laser. I like the green laser because it's coherent light. Yeah. And green is that middle of the spectrum, so it can help neutralize things. So if energy is really hot and inflamed and really painful, then that green light can help calm it down. Or if it's blue or cold and there's not much nerve action going on there, then that can help stimulate those nerves and help wake it up. And so it's using that green coherent light to help you stay more coherent and not get phased by what's going on in your environment.
And it's fascinating you're talking about light entering our infrared spectrum that's being emitted from our body to then start engaging with the nervous system. I've in the last week started to understand polarization of light and its impact on water, creating electricity through crystal. So we have crystals in our red blood cells, and it's creating this electricity. And it brought me to understand a little bit more in terms of our LifeWave patches, the polarization, where David Schmidt has got two patches. Am I correct in understanding that he's creating two different maybe angles of light that's causing the polarization?
I believe so. I believe that's the way that, don't quote me on that, but I believe he is working with different phase angles to create certain light
Yeah.
On certain points. It's absolutely brilliant.
Exactly. So that's what I thought. It's like the brilliance. This is built into us. Mother Nature built it into us, so we're able to convert that solar light. But using those concepts, which Robert O'Becker discovered back in 1972, in terms of polarization of light and how he's just taken it to the next level. Can you share a little bit with us about your time in the lab, working and getting to know David Schmidt and working with these patches? Can you give us any insights?
Well, one of the things that I did, because I was overseeing clinical trials for big pharmaceutical companies, I was trained on how to audit clinics to make sure they were up to FDA standards. So one of the things that David had hired me to do was to go through and create the standard operating procedures for privacy, confidentiality, informed consent, those types of things, so that he's following all of those rules. And then I also was able to go through all of the research papers that he had done, to be able to see some of the outcomes. And I was, pretty blown away with what I was seeing, and definitely wanted to try the patches. And so when I did try the patches, that I definitely knew that they worked. I was telling you earlier about some of the detox patches that I used, and I, while I'm detoxing, I had to pull the patches off the bottom of my foot to finally stop. And I was like, wow, these things are incredibly powerful. But yeah, I think that, seeing more and more of the research that he had done, because I was able to see kind of the compilation, I was blown away by what he had done. And this was, over 15 years ago. This was 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there, that I was seeing more and more about the research that he was doing. And I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah. Well,
I don't get paid. I don't sell them. I don't get paid for saying this. This is just me personally and working with David. And the patches that he's created. I think he's an amazing human being, and what he's created is absolutely mind blowing. And I love, his love for Tesla as well, because he and I have a common love for Nikola Tesla. So we kind of bonded on that, but absolutely amazing company. I've loved, what little interaction. I mean, once I finished that project, I moved on, but I, didn't mind how amazing the products are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used them personally to heal my injury, and it's kind of also blown the minds of my practitioners close to me, because I should have had surgery, but I was like, no ways, I'm going to use light therapy. And I do believe it is the future of medicine. So let's move on to the light you created. You created the spectrochrome. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I told you, the books that I was given by Steve Ross, Let There Be Light and Spectrochrometry Encyclopedia, they were really inspiring for me when I learned about how they were using light to heal all kinds of different diseases, viruses, bacteria, back in the 1920s and 30s. It was mind-blowing. And so I wanted to continue to learn more about that. And what I found is that the work that they, like, if somebody first came into their clinic, the first thing that they would do was they would spend 1 hour shining green light over the entire body. That's it. So green, like I said, was saying before, it's like an adaptogen. So if part of the body was underactive or overactive, that green light for an hour can try to bring the body back into that homeodynamic, state, so that it's more in balance. And then if they have to come back again, then they might target and work on the liver and use red, orange, yellow light to stimulate it if that's what's going on. Or if their liver is overactive and it needs to calm down, then they might use blue, indigo, violet. So then they would just target specific parts of the body and use specific color tonations using colored light in that way. And that was, pretty mind-blowing for me. There was also, in the book, he talked about how red light had certain contraindications. So if a person's central nervous system is already overactive, so if they're kind of anxious and jittery, the last thing that you would want to do would be to put a red light, which is very stimulating, on all of these sensory brain, all of these nerve endings, because then it's just going to be even more stimulated. So, I've been seeing a lot of these beauty light things where they're putting red light on their face, and I'm like, oh my god.
Oh, if you're
I'm like, is it making them even more stressed out? because one of my friends, one of her clients was using this red light thing, and they're like, I'm seeing red. I've got so much anger throughout the day and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So she recommended that they get my laser, and they were like, oh my God, this is like night and day. They just felt more neutral, more calm, just centered, and not, too over amped up. I mean, if it's infrared light, then that's fine. That's more temperature. But if they're using red light, I get that it stimulates the cell division. But it can also be doing a lot more, energetically than just the physical, like, rejuvenation. So what I have suggested some people do is, after using one of those, to use the green to help bring it, like, okay, you've stimulated it. Now let's bring it back to balance, and let's just,
Yeah. But let's also differentiate between using the sun, so watching sunrise and sunset, where we downloading and decoding information for our brains. That's good for us, because that's going to, help our circadian. Like, this is totally different, because this is artificial light at a time in the day where it's probably not right according to our circadian clock.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right on the money.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us more. So the green light can heal tissue.
So, well, what they've started, how Dinshaw was using it was, he was using it to stimulate the pituitary, which is your master gland, help get that into balance. So if that helps secrete all your different hormones. So if that master gland is overactive or it's underactive, using that green light to help bring that back more into neutral. It was also used as an antifungal, antibacterial, antiseptic. So I had a friend of mine who was like, my dentist just called me in for green light therapy on my teeth. And so, so I think more and more doctors are picking up to, the use of green light and that type of thing. One of the things that I had studied the work of Dr. Peter Garriev, and he was using lasers as a carrier wave to be able to carry information into the body or into a system. So one of the things he did, which I found fascinating in some of the animal studies he did, was he took frog larvae, and he took a laser and shone the laser through salamander larvae onto the frog larva. And what happened was, the DNA from that salamander got transferred onto the frog larva, and it turned it 100% into salamander.
Amazing.
Like, the DNA transferred.
Oh.
So he also did a study with test tubes, where he had DNA in one test tube and nothing in the other. And he took the laser, shone it through the one with DNA, and it showed up in the one that doesn't. So a lot of, at least here in the States, we're getting a lot of this fiber optic internet, where all of this information is being passed on light.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that I was listening to one of his talks and his lectures, and somebody had mentioned, for the pharmaceutical industry, this might not be as beneficial, because then they wouldn't be taking them chemistry wise. They would just be, and he said, yeah, it's dangerous in Russia. And then 2020, he was up for a Nobel Prize for this work that he had done, and he mysteriously died.
Oh my goodness.
Before they ever announced the winner. So I was, and his family and friends had said that it, come out and said, this seems suspicious.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's one of those where, it's power to the people. Knowledge is power, instead of taking things that way. So what I did was, with the laser that I have a little cap that you can put whatever you want to. In the cap, so that you can use the laser as a carrier wave to bring whatever you want into the body. So I like to use stones. Anything with quartz is an amplifier, so it kind of helps amplify the light. But I also have friends who they put herbs in there, because sometimes the herbs, if they don't eat it with food, it can make their stomach upset. But whenever they put the herbs in with the laser, they get the benefits, but they don't have the upset stomach. And some also use it for their dogs and their animals, where instead of trying to, like, force this pill down their dog's throat and spitting it back up, and it's traumatizing for everybody involved, being able to use the laser and putting that supplement in the cup. You can shine it into the dog's water, you can shine it onto them, you can however you want to do it. So this
I was just listening online this week, and they're saying if you have a tablespoon of olive oil at night, it speeds up your metabolism. So maybe we can just put olive oil in there rather than drink.
Yeah, I did that I used to, there's a C60, like carbon 60 olive oil that I had, and it was pretty expensive supplement to take. And
Yeah.
so instead of taking it, I got one of the little veg capsule things, and I filled one of those up with olive oil and put it on, and then I was just using it that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have had access to these tools for quite some time.
That sounds amazing.
I love it.
But also it reminds me of, sorry, just to go back to the patches, there was this experiment where they put one patch on, they had two roses in some water, and then they put the patch on the glass, and they left, the one had a patch, the one didn't. And the rose that had a patch on the water was still alive like 3 or 4 weeks later, whereas the other one had died. So it's interesting because water is what we're made up of, more than 70%. So it's like a medium that it goes through. Almost like
it's a really powerful thing to use the laser, not only just in the water that you're going to drink, but also I've done it in the bathtub, and that's been pretty powerful for some people. We had some people who were in their like 80s, 90s. They were living in a senior facility, and the only thing that they changed was they started using the laser in their bath. And so they know like their energy level to go up and down the stairs to get to their apartments or go see their friends. And they were like, I'm not even winded. And so they couldn't believe how much just laying in this charged green water, how much of a difference that made.
So
I like to.
Which makes me think that in terms of the injuries we're treating, so we treat a lot of adhesions, tendons that get stuck, scars that become adherent to the fascia. So it could be quite a useful aid for scars.
Oh, absolutely. So I've had some friends, a friend of mine, she had breast removed from breast cancer, and she had somebody who was kind of working and massaging that scar tissue, after the surgery. And she said she used the laser, and it felt like lightning bolts over the scars. It just felt super electric. And then whenever the massage therapist came in to massage that scar tissue, they were like, "What did you do? This is breaking down so easily." They couldn't believe it. So, and I've also had another friend of mine, she had a C-section scar, and she's in her early 60s at this point, so very old scar. And she used the laser over the scar, and she said, again, it felt like lightning bolts is what I hear most often with scars. And she said she felt a rush of electricity be able to flow down her legs, which I think that would be really important to have full electricity from the waist down. So that was a really powerful experience for her to use them for scars. And sometimes what I'll also do is I've got a piece of quartz crystal. I don't know if I've got one handy. And then I'll shine the laser like with the quartz over the scar. If it's here, I put the quartz over the top and then shine the laser. And so that amplifies that light going into the body over those areas. And anytime you're putting like a cream, like if you're trying to put on a facial cream or a cream onto a sore, putting the laser and letting that penetrate through that cream into the body, I feel like that can also help boost it into your field a little bit better. So sometimes when I put creams or something on, I'll kind of blast it with the laser to help kind of set it in.
I do that with my ultrasound machine. I have this incredible aloe heat lotion, and if I put it under the gel and I use the ultrasound light, it just lasts longer. The pain-free feeling lasts a lot longer. So
the other thing I wanted to say about the baths is that when I like to use sea salt or Epsom salt in the bath. So once I put the salt in, because that's kind of like a crystal as well, that's when I shine the laser, is like on the salt in the water, so that the salt crystals kind of amp up. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I want to also say, like, I didn't realize how much tension that my hair held, like the hair follicles. And because I'd had that seizure, I had a lot of charge in my system, and I'd had a session where we had worked on the seizure. So afterwards, I still kind of felt really electric, and I was like, I'm just gonna go take a salt bath. And normally when I take a bath, I'd put my hair up and I would just soak from here down. But this, I felt particularly like electric, that I just sunk all the way
No.
underwater, and I couldn't believe how much charge each hair follicle. It was like I could feel them all relax. Oof.
Wow.
These antennas, like they totally relaxed. I didn't even realize how much tension my face was
Yeah.
holding, that when it went under the salt water and that muscle just totally relaxed, I was like, oh my God, why have I not done this before? And then, it's making sure that you rinse all the salts, out and off whenever you're finished. But that was a really powerful thing for me to, I call it going full mermaid under the water. It can be a really powerful experience too, if you're feeling, extra charged or really electric. I know when the lockdowns and the riots were going on here in the US, it was super electric in the atmosphere, and I had to take a salt bath like every day. And I was even like pouring more salt in there. But it's incredible how you can use that kind of ocean, creating an ocean and getting
Yeah.
into that water, that it
Magnetism.
can
Yeah.
reset, and like, oh, now I can think clear, now that all of this like electricity and charge is out of my field.
That you just explained to me, because if I think about the spectrum of light, you've got green in the middle before blue, the sun's spectrum. And when I injured my knee, I was in Mauritius, and I didn't have my patches, and I didn't have anything but kinesiotaping. And so every day I was on the beach and in that Mauritian water. There's something magnificent about it. Like, I don't know if it's the minerals and the salt, but it was the combination of the green light on that water as well. And being in that, I was still able to walk 5,000 steps a day and climb 4 flights of stairs and snorkel for 2 kilometers. And I do believe it had to do with that natural environment.
Absolutely. Well, being able to be barefoot and ground,
Yeah, and
all that
ground.
charged out, and then also recharging, getting those electrons.
Yes.
So kind of having that connection with this massive planet floating through space is a powerful thing.
What we have to try and do is give patients that ability in their homes, because not everyone has access to it. I felt it when I came back to South Africa. I was like, oh, I've lost my healing, my natural healing powers. And so that's what you're able to do is to do. But one shouldn't shine that green light in the eye. That would be a precaution, wouldn't it?
I would be cautious, shining it straight in the eyes. I do tend to have if I close my eyes, I can pass it over, quickly, and that seems to be fine. After I had, made the box and was like, don't shine this in your eyes, I had gone up to an eye doctor up in Connecticut. And when he saw it on the box, he was like, and he closed his eyes and he said, this is fine. Because he gave me this LED light thing that he was having patients to get light in their eyes. And I don't even like LEDs in the first place, just the electricity and the waveform. I don't like LEDs.
Yeah.
But when he put this pad over my eyes and he plugged it in, and it was just like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot more green light, than what my laser is producing. But just to be on the safe side, I say, try not to shine it directly in the eye. And, if I keep mine closed, and I'll go kind of do a quick pass, and it's fine. I had met another lady who's been, working with light for many years, and she's like, oh, I always use green in the eyes. And I was like, it's the one place that I tell people don't shine it is in the eyes.
Shine it. I think
but there are ways that you can use a photo of a person, like a witness. So you can take a picture of yourself. If you wanted to work on your own eyes, you could take a picture of yourself and shine the laser onto the picture of your eyes, like doing kind of like a remote healing. It's ways that you can work on people from a distance.
Because I think I remember in one of your podcasts, you were talking about how people's vision improved with just using the light around the temples.
Yeah, the pressure in their eye improved. And this guy was like in his 70s, 72, 73. And the eye doctor was like, I never see anybody your age where the eye pressure improves. it usually only keeps getting worse or plateaus
Yeah.
off somewhere. But this laser can work for traumatic memories. It also works with relationships. I had used this laser with somebody, and we had him look at an eye chart, and he could read line 6 and line 8 with his out of 10, and so then what we did was we were doing some muscle testing, and I had him think about his mother, and his fingers broke open, like his energy field went weak just by thinking about her mother. It just And so I didn't even shine the laser on him. I shined the laser on a hair sample that I got from him. I shined the laser on his DNA that way. And I was like, okay, think about your mom. And I'd shine the laser on his DNA. And then I went back and I checked with muscle testing, and that when he thought about his mother, his energy field was really strong. I couldn't even begin to bring his fingers apart. And then I also had him think about his whole maternal line. So like his grandmother, but I try not to get too caught up on, okay, now think about your mother's mother. And I'd like to be really broad in my thought bubble so that we can clear a lot more people in one go. So I had him think about his whole maternal line. And then we did the same thing with his dad and his paternal line. And then we had him think about his mother and father together, which definitely broke open. His parents, he was in foster care, so he was separated from his parents when he was a child. And so that's where a lot of this kind of charge came from. And then we had him think about him with his parents, that trifecta, which I knew had been broken up since he was a child. And that had broken open. And then once that cleared, we went and checked his eyes again, and his vision improved by 2 lines in each eye. And his biological parents have passed on by this point, but his foster parents, who he had run away when he was 16 years old, they were threatening to send him to military school. And so he ran away when he was 16, and flash forward, he's 50 now, or at the time that we did this. And oddly enough, how the cosmos work, his foster family moved about 45 minutes away from him. And so he started spending, going over there for dinner once a week and like reconnecting and bringing that relationship back. So that was, just also how his life played out after clearing some of this charge towards, his own mother and father and that. And I've also done this work, for myself with my parents and also my siblings. And so your siblings, that's where you can have like a lot of charge. And the work that I was doing with the tuning forks, it kept bringing up all of these old traumas that I had from my siblings beating me up and being the youngest of 4. And so when I shined the laser and I started thinking, and I just thought about each sibling, and I just imagined us laughing together. So I didn't think about any particular memory. I just imagined that we were like laughing. And that night, all I could think of were all of the hilarious things that happened through my childhood, of like things my brothers said or that we did. And I was laughing so hard, my side hurt. And I was like, wow, this is so much more fun than having, go through all of the trauma. I'm having a really great time processing this treatment, because I was having so much fun laughing and seeing more of the light side of the relationships rather than all of the emotional agony that things of old traumas can bring up. So that was a lot more fun.
I love that. Psychologists should have it. Well, they'll be out of work, but really what they do is they keep people in therapy and going over and over and over trauma from the past. Whereas if you do this, because also there's a lot of ancestral pain that gets passed through generations, and also like their choices of food, their choices of poor light, their choices in life of where they live, definitely get passed through the generation. So to do work like this, you're kind of clearing those channels, aren't you?
I mean, I think so. I mean, how can we test it and measure these kinds of things? I don't know, but watching and seeing how people's lives change and how they, interact with the world differently, is pretty mind-blowing. I know that this laser, one of my favorite ways to use it is to help clear emotional charge from past trauma. So if you do think back to something and it still makes you sad, and you can feel your energy field go, whoa,
Mm.
or it still pisses you off and you get really electric and you feel how like fiery you get just thinking about it. Being
Yeah.
able to use the laser and letting yourself go back to that memory and feeling that feeling, this laser can help neutralize the charge from that trauma. So for example, a woman, her husband passed away 2 years ago and she found him dead on the floor. And so she said, every time, it'll pop into my mind, I get charged, or if I'm talking to someone and I tell them I found my husband dead on the floor, I can feel this whole surge of electricity. Even 2 years later, she said, I still felt it. And then she used the laser and she said, Kimberly, now if I picture it in my mind, I feel neutral. And if I'm talking to people about it, it just feels like information. And so the more that you can be neutral and not triggered by things that are going on in your outside or your own thoughts,
Mm.
then that can help coherent conserve energy when you're not bending on all emotional things. So sometimes I like to use it if I'm going to meditate, because my mind will either go into the past, but this also works into the future too. So if you're thinking about something that hasn't even happened and you're getting anxious about, what about this thing? Then holding that laser and letting that neutralize that charge so that you're like, okay, well, I guess we'll figure it out once we get there. Or, you can at least think about this thing in the future from a neutral space rather than this kind of anxious, electric, chaotic field. You want to bring that when your body or your system goes into that state, bringing in this coherent green centering. It's not polarized. It's not those hot red, orange, yellows, and it's not the cold blue, indigo, violets. It's that happy Goldilocks middle of the spectrum. So that's one of my favorite ways to use it, is for emotional trauma, because then if something similar were to happen, instead of getting re-triggered and you're like, now this thing that's happening and that's reminds you of an old trauma, if your old trauma is neutral, then you can be looking at this thing that's happening and you don't feel phased by it. You
Move
feel
on.
neutral. Like,
Yeah.
thing is happening, you're like, oh, look at me. I don't even feel charged by that. Like, the number of times that has happened to me where I'm like, I would have totally lost it,
Yeah.
before. If somebody were to have said this or did this to me, I would have lost it. But now look at me, this is happening and I'm totally like neutral about it. So it's a way to conserve your energy so that you're not spending it, especially with, mental
Yeah.
emotional things just kind of spin around in there.
I think also, like you were saying before, about thought and intention and how DNA can be changed through laser, like even on the other side of the world. So if there's been an issue with somebody else and you doing that work on yourself, and suddenly your thoughts and your intentions change, the shift is going to not just happen with you, it's actually going to happen with that other person or that other relationship. So it's very exciting.
Well, and it can also work on your whole bloodline, because
Mm,
everybody's, your DNA is vibrating at a certain
yeah.
frequency when you're related to people. If we had to get a room full of guitars and they were all tuned to the same frequency, you pluck one, they're all going to resonate. So
Mm.
any kind of work that you do where you're clearing even one person, it's going to shift everyone in the family, and I say the entire planet, because I think we are, we're all cousins in some way or another if we go far enough back. I think, we
Kind
realize that we are one.
kind of reminds me of plasma and using plasma, which is what I've started introducing into my practice, and holding these little plasma bottles. I sometimes get a patient to hold them, it grounds them. It's the same thing, and it's all about the electrons and the protons and, the magnetism. So it's very cool. But what I want to ask you is, where do you see your career going from here? What do you think's next for you? You've done so much. Is there something intriguing you that you want to explore?
Well, I just finished doing an online coherency class, so I want more people to be able to use this and to help even more people. So I teach people how to use the laser and the tuning forks. I use the 111 hertz tuning fork. It's one that, when I've just started using it, I was like, oh, this makes me purr. I love the way this field feels. And then when I started working with it, I was just like, I love it. So I teach people how to use it you can tune plants. I start with like, let's just tune a plant first, and then how to work on pain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, I mentioned how to work on the hands if there's a chaotic electric field, here in the extremities, of being able to bring in the coherent lights and the coherent sound to be able to bring, that kind of shaking back to stillness.
That sounds fascinating, and I know we had a little brief chat about it, but you are quite keen to help us in our field, to teach us, and you teach online, so we're going to talk a little bit more, you and I, about creating a little course for therapists. But what do you think you could do for the hand therapy world in terms of teaching us? You would combine tuning forks and the laser.
And the lasers. One of the things that when I first started working with the laser, I was shining it on the hand, and I was showing a friend of mine, her son, who's an electrician, who kind of thinks this is all weird stuff. But he was shining it. I had him shine it on his hand, and there was a certain place where he was like, wow, it gets really tingly right here. And so I showed him on a reflexology map that relates to the stomach, and he looks at me surprised, and he was like, I haven't had a bowel movement in 3 days. And I said, well,
too much information, but let's work with it.
I was like, okay, well, you might want to just hold the laser there. And he was like, well, how long? I said, I don't know. And not even 5 minutes later, he was like, okay, it stopped tingling. Can I take it off? I said, yeah, sure. So, so the next day I got a full report of bowel movements and getting things to move. But so using it that way, but also I grew up, I played piano when I was in school, and then also I played clarinet, and there would be certain times I inherited arthritis from my grandmother. So my knuckles had gotten really swollen, and even though I was a teenager, they would kind of lock into place, and I'd have to be able to keep playing either the clarinet or the piano. So I already knew my surgery, I was never gonna be a heart surgeon because of my hands. So but when I first came out with this laser, I sent one up to my grandmother, who her hands get so bad she can't even open a jar, and so she started using the laser on her hands, and she's like, I can open the jars. She swears by it. There was another friend of mine, her mother, who was 103 and had nurses coming in. Her nurses knew to have that laser charged up and ready to use on her hands every day, because she feel a big difference if they're locked and you can't do anything. Then being able to have something that's can get things moving and flowing is a game changer, whether you can use your hands or not. It's a powerful thing.
Have you found that it helps with nerve compressions, carpal tunnel, cubital tunnel, those kind of disorders?
I mean, it's only, I've had some people report back, like one person said that it's helped with their carpal tunnel, but I don't have the research studies to be able to back it up. So it's more like anecdotal stories. Yeah. So I think it could help with carpal tunnel. My mom, she has like cysts that will grow in her knuckles. She's loves to crochet and knit, and so her little knuckles get worked on, and a cyst grew, and the doctors were talking about having to cut it out and finding where it is in the knuckle and the joint, and they said that it could come back. And my mom's like, and all of her friends who had this done, it always came back. So she's like, I'm not even going to do it. She said she started using the laser, and so she would use the laser every night, and that cyst went away.
Amazing. So also like those little herpedine nodes. That's exciting. I think that, as healers, we have to draw on every tool that we can, because you're always going to get a patient that is really struggling. I had a patient this week with a lateral epicondylitis, and it is the worst case I've ever seen. It's because of paddle. We're getting crazy paddle injuries. This man is so obsessed that he had like 3 kits in his car, and he would just drive around finding courts and often play 3 games a day. He was just so obsessed with playing. He's given himself horrendous lateral epicondylitis, and no matter what I did, actually, it's not healing him. He doesn't want to have steroid injections, doesn't want to have surgery. I was like, oh, imagine having the spectrochrome laser. So I think it's so nice to be able, even though you've tried every trick in your book, you've utilized every tool, to grab that one extra tool that can shift that pain for that patient. I think will be so exciting for us as therapists, and to be taught by the inventor herself is really amazing.
Well, what I love is that, it's something that you can kind of shine onto the area, but then if you had other, like if you were doing massage or you were doing acupuncture, or you were doing some other type of therapy, just having that light, doing its thing while you're doing it, you might find that you can do a lot more and have a lot more progress than not having that.
Get there faster. Definitely. Well, I do believe, like I said, light is the future of medicine. I think that it's an important concept to understand and to utilize and integrate into our practices. So yeah, well, let's say to everybody, watch the space, because we can certainly bring that to them. But Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and just everything that you've been through to get to where you are today. And I think what's so amazing is that you have a real passion to want to heal people and help people, stemming from where you've come from, but combining it with your brilliance and, your engineering and all your knowledge, and being able to just deliver it to us as lay people in a way. It's just, we can really relate to you, and you kind of explain it to us on that level. So thank you so much for not overwhelming us with all of that detail, but really just bringing it home to us in terms of how we can use this in our lives to shift patterns, heal relationships, heal our bodies. It's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for helping me get the message out there to be able to help others. So thank you so much.
Brilliant.